Good evening, Mr. Murphy.
Good evening.
Please state your name and the spelling of your last for the record.
It's Pat Murphy, M-U-R-P-H-Y.
Mr. Murphy, what do you do for a living?
I'm currently the Director of Permitting Services and Residential Inspections for Skillington County.
And how long have you worked in that position?
So I've been the Director for 20 years now.
And what did you do before that?
So before I was Director, I was an inspector for the county for 12 years.
Was that in the same division?
It is, yes.
Now, do you inspect homes?
I do inspect homes.
Do you only inspect homes?
No, other buildings as well in the county.
Did you have to go to school for this type of work?
I did. I obtained my engineering degree from Skillington University.
Did you receive any other type of degree or certification while you were there?
So I did receive a certification in building inspections.
Now, did you receive training for this work even after that?
Yes, of course.
Now, as Director of Permitting Services and Residential Inspections, what do your job duties entail?
Well, as a director, I oversee numerous inspectors, make sure we're up to code, we're up to national standards when it comes to buildings and different kind of maintenance issues, structural issues, and things like that. So it's a lot, but yeah.
Now, let's say there is an issue and you have to go to inspect a home. Tell me about how that happens.
Well, that happens several ways. If people want to construct various buildings, they have to obtain permits. Again, that's part of my job, is to make sure people obtain the necessary permits to do this construction. We also go out and inspect homes, older homes, when people buy them or purchase them. We do various inspections in that way, and again, construction as well.
So if you're called to inspect a home, what do you look for?
There's a lot of things that we look for. Again, there's numerous code ordinances that we make sure are being followed. We look for structural issues. That's a big thing with older construction. There's a lot.
Have you ever been called to inspect decks?
Yes, a lot, numerous times.
And when you go to inspect these decks, does any type of measuring or calculations go into your
Objection
analysis?
leading.
It's the preliminary matters, I think, we need to qualify an expert.
Yes, Your Honor.
So I'll allow it.
I'll repeat my question, Mr. Murphy. Do any type of measuring or calculations go into your inspection analysis?
Yes, of course. For decks specifically, there's a lot of measuring with the boards, make sure the various structures are measured appropriately, the distances, ledger boards and things of that matter must be measured appropriately, so I would say calculations have to be done.
And do you need specialized methods to decide if a home is up to the standards in your profession?
Yes, I would say specialized methods is just kind of a specialized knowledge that you have to have. Again, not everybody can do this. There's a lot of material that goes into it.
Could anyone off the street do the work that you do?
Objection speculation.
I will sustain that and rephrase the question.
Yes. Mr. Murphy, could anyone without the training? I'll let go of my question.
Okay, sounds good, thank you.
How long has it taken you to develop this skill set?
Well, the skill set that I have is an accumulation of 32 years of experience when it comes to inspections on top of my academic degree. So it's a lot of experience that goes into at least my role as the director.
Now, as the director, which you just spoke about, did you start off in that role?
No, I was an inspector here beforehand.
So how did you earn that position?
Well, I'd like to think it's because of my merit, that I was a good inspector, and I did a really good job at that. And before I was an inspector, I worked on construction, so I have a knowledge base, I have a solid foundation when it comes to construction and maintenance issues.
Are you familiar with the ordinances necessary for home inspections in Stilton County?
Of course, yes, it's my job.
did you help draft any guidelines to abide by in Stilton County?
I have. I've authored numerous safety pamphlets. I've authored deck maintenance informational guidelines. I've authored numerous diagrams and publications of that matter.
And are these guidelines and publications created within the standard practice of deck inspection and maintenance in the country?
So we adhere to the national standard, and I'm proud in Stilton County, at least, we go above and beyond the national standard.
And does the town rely on you to use these methods to inspect homes?
Yes.
The exterior of the home?
Exterior, interior.
And Mr. Murphy, about how many homes would you say you've inspected while you've been in the inspection role as well as director role?
Well, over the course of 32 years, I would estimate it's definitely in the thousands.
And do you direct a group of inspectors in Stilton County?
Yes, sir.
And do you task all of these inspectors with abiding by these same methods and principles?
Of course.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff qualifies Mr. Pat Murphy as an expert witness in building inspections, maintenance, and construction industry standards.
Okay, I will, tender this expert in the area of deck maintenance,
Building inspections,
building inspections,
maintenance,
maintenance,
and construction industry standards.
and construction industry standards. Got it. You may continue.
What experience do you have with deck building and inspecting?
Well, a lot. So, again, before I was an inspector, I built decks. I was a construction worker. And then as an inspector, I've inspected numerous decks. As a director, I make sure that people in the county who are building decks do it up to code, do it properly, and responsible for inspecting all decks.
Now, if you were to see an original diagram of a deck today, could you identify whether or not it was built in accordance with the standard practices in your field?
Yes, I believe I can.
The plaintiff marks Exhibit 4 for identification, approaching opposing counsel with Exhibit 4. Your Honor, permission to approach the witness? Now, Mr. Murphy, I'm handing you what has been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 4. Can you tell me what that is?
So this appears to be a diagram of a two-story deck.
How do you know?
Well, I created this diagram, and it has all the necessary parts for that.
Was it built in accordance with the standards and methods used in your field?
Yes,
And is this an image of a properly constructed deck?
it absolutely is, yes.
The plaintiff moves to admit Exhibit 4 into evidence.
Exhibit 4 will be received into evidence.
Permission to publish, Your Honor?
You may. There was no objection.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you'll now be shown Plaintiff's Exhibit 4 on the screen, which the witness has identified as a properly constructed deck. Your Honor, permission for the witness to step down and interact with the diagram?
Sure. You may step into the well of the court.
Now, is this a standalone deck or a deck attached to a home?
This is a deck attached to a home.
How can you tell?
Well, I can tell for one major reason, and that's what the ledger board is for. So the ledger board right here would be affixed into the home.
Now, can you explain further what a ledger board is?
So ledger board is a mechanism to affix a second-story deck to the exterior of the residence.
Mr. Murphy, using that diagram, please point to the attachments connecting the intersection of the deck floor to the ledger board that you just spoke about.
Like this here.
And what holds those intersections together?
Well, so the industry standard is to use about a 1/2-inch lag bolts with washers.
Now, is that a type of screw?
Yes, it is.
Let's say I don't want to pay for that screw. Could I use any other type of screw to hold those intersections together?
No, again, the industry standard 1/2-inch lag bolts with washers.
The say I still don't have that screw, could I use nails to hold that intersection together?
That is absolutely not, no.
And what happens if those special screws are not used?
Well, the screws aren't used in that way, or they're old, it can result in a collapse.
What happens if I decide to use nails instead?
So nails don't have the same kind of strength or grip strength that these screws do, which is why we don't recommend them, right? They're not up to code, and using them can also result in collapse and can cause the wood to deteriorate quicker, so it's not a good idea.
Mr. Murphy, you may return to your seat.
Thank you.
Now, do you tell all of the property owners in your county to use these screws to maintain decks?
Yes, all the property owners that inquire about it or that I speak with about the decks, yes.
Have you told property managers in your area to ensure they use these specific screws to maintain decks?
Objection hearsay. He's talking about his own out of court statement that he's told.
I think, not yet, because I think that calls for just a yes or no answer. I mean, did you tell anyone or didn't? Did you or didn't you? I don't think the substance is being elicited yet, anyway.
I'll repeat my question, Mr. Murphy. Have you told all of the property managers in your area to ensure these types of screws are used to maintain decks?
I've told numerous property managers. I don't know if it's been all of them in the area. Stilton County is relatively large, but definitely a lot.
And why do you tell owners or managers this information?
Well, I tell owners and managers this information because we want to mitigate accidents from happening and ensure that things are properly constructed.
Now, do you know the owner of Knight Management Property LLC, Ms. Morgan Knight?
I absolutely do, yes.
How?
Morgan and I have been friends for years.
Have you interacted during work hours?
Yes, times.
Outside of work hours?
Yes, we're both in a bowling league together on Tuesdays.
And you said, does that bowling league meet every Tuesday?
Yes, it does, weekly.
Now, have you all ever spoken about properties in Stilton County?
Of course we have.
Have you all ever spoken about maintenance of properties in Stilton County?
Yes, we have.
Do property managers usually ask you about maintenance for their homes?
I get a lot of questions due to my experience and the nature of my job.
Have property managers ever asked you about how to maintain a deck?
Yes, they have.
And has Ms. Knight ever spoken to you about deck maintenance?
She has.
How did that conversation go?
So I do remember Ms. Knight asking me if she could use nails to affix a deck to a house, which is, as we've already discussed, not the proper mechanism to affix a deck to a house. I was kind of taken back by that question. At her as an experienced property manager, I kind of expected a little bit more from her, and I told her that no, that is not the standard to use.
Do you remember when that conversation took place?
I believe that conversation took place sometime early in 2019.
Mr. Murphy, did you ever personally inspect any properties for Ms. Knight that she managed?
Yes, over the course of, many years of our relationship, I've inspected several properties.
To the extent of your knowledge, has the county inspected the exterior property at 1414 Midvale Avenue within the last 5 years?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Did you have any inspections? Were you performing any specific type of inspections in 2019 in Stilton County?
Yes, I was. We were doing the free residential deck inspections during the month of May.
Tell me more about that.
So every May is a safety month for the county. It's something that I put on. May of 2019, it was Deck Safety Month. It's my favorite time of the year. I like to nerd out over safety, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. So I was really busy working on a lot of inspections for that month.
Now, was that safety month advertised?
Yes,
How did you advertise it?
Well, several means of advertising. We utilize the county website to advertise, and I'm also proud to use various social media to advertise.
Did you and Ms. Knight ever speak about these deck inspections happening in 2019?
Yes, we did.
And how did that conversation go?
She, I believe, inquired if she could get an inspection. We were already booked up by that time. Obviously, it was kind of late in April, I believe, and couldn't get her in.
Now, who performed the inspections for these decks?
I did a lot of them. Some of my other inspectors did some as well.
Did they cost?
No, they were free. That's why the county does it.
Now, how early on did you say you informed the public of this opportunity?
So, to the best of my recollection, we started advertising on the county website. Started scheduling this on April 1st.
Did these appointments have to be scheduled through the homeowners?
Homeowners, property managers, whoever wanted to do the inspection.
Could property managers book them?
Of course, yes.
And do property managers typically book these appointments with you?
A lot of them, yes, they're rentals.
If someone notices they have an issue with the deck and they call you, what do you instruct them to do?
Well, first thing I instruct them to do is to avoid it and try to get out there as soon as I can.
The plaintiff marks Exhibit 5 for identification, showing to opposing counsel. Approaching the witness with what has been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 5. Now, Mr. Murphy, can you tell me what that is?
So this is the deck maintenance inspection guidelines, which I created.
Were these created with the standard methods and practices within your field?
Yes, they are.
And do all county inspectors that you cover abide by these guidelines?
They absolutely have to abide by these guidelines, yes.
Thank you. The plaintiff admits Exhibit 5 as evidence.
Exhibit 5 will be received as evidence.
Plaintiff further moves to admit Plaintiff's Exhibit 5 of publication by enlargement.
You may put on the, or project it.
Yeah, by the projector for
Yeah,
enlargement.
sure.
Your Honor, let the record reflect that I am highlighting lines 1 through 3.
Record will sum it up.
Mr. Murphy, please read lines 1 through 3 for the jury.
Maintenance on a deck should be done on a regular basis. It will keep the structure safe and enhance the longevity of the deck itself. Below is a checklist of suggestions that should be done at least once a year to minimize degradation of the deck itself and enhance your enjoyment of a well-maintained deck.
Now, why did you write these lines?
Well, wrote those lines as an introduction, why it's important to maintain your deck and do regular routine maintenance.
I'm now showing you what has been previously identified as Exhibit 5, but page 2 of that document. Let the record reflect that I am now highlighting the first bullet point under fasteners on page 2 of Exhibit 5.
The record will sum reflect.
Mr. Murphy, please read that first bullet point there.
Check all fasteners in the deck. Tighten all nuts and bolts. Look for popping nails and drive all nails that have been raised off the surface of the deck boards.
Now, what happens if these suggestions are not followed?
Well, if these suggestions are not followed, it can result in a
could they result in a deck degrading?
Absolutely.
How about collapsing?
Unfortunately, yes.
Now, did you ever give Ms. Knight a copy of those guidelines?
I recall giving Ms. Knight a copy of those specific guidelines back in March of 2017.
Was this publicly available information?
Yes, it was.
Where could it be found?
This information can be found on the county website.
Now, Mr. Murphy, I'm gonna take you back to the date of May 12th, 2019. Did you ever visit the site of 1414 Midvale Avenue?
Yes, I did.
Was it on that date?
It was on May 12th, 2019. Yes.
Why did you go there?
I went out there because I was called by the fire department to inspect the deck after its collapse.
Did you know at the time that Ms. Knight was the manager of that property?
I did not.
The plaintiff marks Exhibit 1 for identification. Approaching opposing counsel with Exhibit 1. Now approaching the witness with what has been marked as plaintiff's Exhibit 1. Mr. Murphy, do you know what that is?
I do, yes.
Tell me what it is.
That is a photo I took when I arrived on scene May 12th on the deck.
And what were you doing there?
I was called there to do an inspection for the fire department.
Is taking that photograph a part of the inspection?
Yes,
Is this a fair and accurate description of what that scene looked like when you arrived?
yes.
Thank you. Plaintiff moves to admit Exhibit 1 into evidence. Exhibit 1 will be received into evidence. Permission to publish by projector.
Okay.
Now, how did the deck look when you saw it that day?
Unfortunately, the deck looked like it was in terrible shape.
Besides the obvious collapse, tell me if you noticed anything.
Yes, so one of the first things I noticed were hundreds of nails protruding from the deck. It looked like the deck was attached to the home using these nails instead of the industry standard screws.
Did you see any screws at all in the wood?
So the screws that I saw appeared to be extremely worn and old.
And those hundreds of nails you spoke about, what did those
Objection, Your
look like?
Honor, we've been over the hundreds of nails plenty of times at this point.
I'll allow it, I think she's still developing a different series of.
Asked and answered.
It's a
I'm
different
gonna allow
question.
it. I'll allow it.
I'm going to back up, Mr. Murphy. Those nails that you just said you saw, what did they look like?
Well, they look like, I don't know the best way to describe it, it's like a porcupine. So the wood had hundreds of nails through it. I could only estimate the size of the nail, maybe an inch, 2-inch nails. I mean, they're hardly painted wood, but there's a lot of them.
Now, that wood you just spoke about, how did that look?
Wood looked relatively old and decayed, probably as a result of the nails.
Were you shocked at what you saw on the scene that day?
Yes, it's horrifying. And these are the accidents that I seek to avoid in my current role. This is what we don't want to happen.
To the extent of your knowledge, did Ms. Knight have an inspection with your office anytime from 2016 to May 11th, 2019?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Did Ms. Knight have any upcoming appointments with your office for a deck inspection after the tragedy that took place?
Yes, I believe an appointment was scheduled for May 20th.
Now, when did you start advertising on the county website those free inspections that would be offered for decks?
We started a sign-up list on April 1st on the county website.
And when did you start advertising on social media?
I believe it was later in the month, April 29th.
And And when were those deck inspections set to begin?
Beginning of May.
And how often do industry standards in your field suggest exterior decks be inspected?
Again, according to the deck maintenance guideline sheet, which I created, we recommend decks be inspected yearly.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.